Hello, guys. My product name is Ephemeral Twitter. It's for Internet of Things Final Project. Um, so I'll just start with my concept. So I was initially interested in pursuing some questions about privacy in America, and I think people don't really care, but it's something that we should care. We should care about. And I wanted to do something beyond just educating people about privacy. I think educating people is important, but it seems unlikely that people are going to take action after being educated. I think um, people don't have the time, the resources, or the motivation usually to pursue the steps after being educated. Um, uh, and I think, especially when it comes to data privacy, it those steps can be somewhat challenging and sort of hard to know where to begin. And I think the environment today um, sort of reveals an inverse relationship between convenience and privacy. So as convenience goes up, privacy goes down. People are like constantly exchanging their privacy for conveniences. Like, um, you give a website some information or some data, and then you get to use it for free. Is like a pretty common example. Um, and people seem generally okay with this notion. And I think another major source of personal information is social media, and many platforms store your information on their servers, and everything you post on Facebook, for instance, or Twitter, persists for an indefinite period of time. They could persist forever. And should this information exist after it is faded from relevancy? Is the information you posted, 6 months ago representative of you? Um, I would argue it's not. And like, should it still be there? So my concept sort of evolved from just privacy, which is a pretty broad topic, and has been narrowed down to a few questions concerning data hygiene. So these are sort of my guiding design questions. Like, how can social media interactions be redesigned to make interactions more spontaneous and realistic? At the same time, how can social media be more conscientious about our data hygiene and help improve personal internet privacy? Um, so, what if these platforms, people are lazy. Um, what if platforms began to take the effort and took the step, the first step in ensuring that our privacy, that, that these platforms care about your privacy? I think it's easier for a platform to do that, um, easier than it is for people to take these steps. And what new experiences might people have on such a platform? Um, so the main idea, so sort of mediating the constraints of the assignment, which is the enclosed controller and having up, down, left, right ability, and using P5JS with my concept, which is basically to create an ephemeral social media platform. I decided to make my social media platform somewhat resemble neural networks. And I think this is a suiting metaphor because neural networks grow and fade over time as new connections are created and old ones decay. This organic structure reflects the ephemeral behavior I want to be present in my platform. Um, so I think this this platform is just a more natural way for people to communicate. I think it also will help solve some of these data hygiene problems that exist on today's platforms like Facebook and Twitter. Um, and I think Snapchat does a good job of sort of solving this, but they do it in a different way, right? You take pictures, and that's largely how you communicate with other people. It's not really communication because you just see sort of snapshots, um, which you know Mine is going to be more text-based. So what sort of like new like interactions, what sort of things might come out of that? So supporting research. Um, so a lot of this was sort of presented in my previous slide. I think it's still very relevant and important. I think so. Privacy apathy is widespread today, and we often trade our personal information for short-term economic conveniences, sort of like I said before. Um, and we give it away carelessly and without understanding or having any care for consequences. And many of these consequences we maybe can't even see. These consequences aren't really tangible. And I think it's sort of like out of sight, out of mind. And I think with privacy, people haven't really taken a strong stance. There's not really like, as a nation, we aren't, uh, sided one way or the other, at least not yet. So it's, 61% of adults disagree with the statement. I appreciate that online services are more efficient because of the increased access of data, and at the same time, 55% agree with the statement. I'm willing to share information about myself with companies in order to use online services for free. So these are like pretty contradictory statements, and it just sort of shows that people haven't really made up their mind about this. So another, um, this one is from Q Internet, called Social Media and the Spiral of Silence. So this is a phenomenon where people feel increasing inhibition to post their opinions or thoughts on social media. And according to this research poll, the conclusion is that some people may prefer not to share their views on social media because their posts persist and can be found later, perhaps by prospective employers or others with high status. And I think this prevents people from maybe talking about more controversial topics. It generally just like inhibits people from posting things that they want to share. And with an ephemeral platform, you can eliminate some of these inhibitions and some of the consequences of posting. So ultimately, my project attempts to design a solution to the combined problem of social media's spiral of silence and contemporary media platforms' data hygiene empathy. This platform will provide more organic communication and an alternative way of viewing what's popular and important, rather than an algorithm deciding what to show you, such as like Facebook's newsfeed, which is like a strange combination of like advertisements and like the most popular post or whatever. It's what shows up there is it's not really clear how it decides that. And sometimes you're like, why is this here? So rather than the algorithm deciding what to show you, sort of people will decide what is relevant, and then you decide what to look at in this platform. So let's get to it. So a few qualities. Platform will steal the 144 character post limit from Twitter because it's a small, manageable chunk of data, easy to eliminate and erase, and it's really easy for people to read. It's sort of immediate, right? Another thing, it should be attract users to the platform. It should be ephemeral in nature, obviously, and it needs to be intuitive, simple, easy to use. That's sort of one way to attract users to the platform. If it's easy to use, then people are going to use it. It's not as much of a barrier. So another thing is I want to resemble a network, sort of going back to the neural network metaphor that I was talking about before. So my process. I use the laser cutter. I also use a plasma cutter. I'm using Raspberry Pi, Arduino, P5, and socket to construct a controller. So this was made in Rhino. It just shows sort of like all the components. I've got a button, a keyboard, I've got a joystick, the Arduino's in there, breadboard, and it's all sort of chipboard construction right now. Sort of, right, everything's here because it needs to be here. It's a box. It's like everything necessary to house all these different components. And this is sort of the form that arose out of those requirements. And the reason I have a keyboard is so people can type, their 144 character post, as opposed to maybe speak. I feel like a keyboard is better than speech in some ways because it's a little bit more private. It's a lot harder for people to like look at the keyboard and figure out what you're typing versus hearing from across the room what you're saying. And I think that having speech as a main input might actually inhibit what people are going to post. So why this controller? Sort of like I said before, it exists to house the components. It's there because it's necessary. I use the joystick. The joystick is the primary interface for navigating the landscape. So it's sort of everything's going to be two-dimensional. You can go up, down, left, right. And the joystick, at least for this sort of like cabinet that I'll be building, is like the universal symbol for interaction. I think everybody knows what a joystick is used for. You touch it and you immediately know what to do with it. And then cardboard construction. This is the resource that I had. It's a dense material, so it does provide some durability. And you'll see later that I actually top it with some steel plating just to add more durability, make it sturdy. And I've got the keyboard. I talked about that. And then there's a button used to create a new post or comment. The posting button has been separated from the keyboard to emphasize that action rather than being sort of hidden on the keyboard. I think it's important to separate it just to draw more attention. So with the controller, I made what I'm calling a media cabinet. It's this is what it looks like. You get perspective left and front. So the reason I made a media cabinet, or what I'm calling the media cabinet, I actually wanted to design it to look similar to like an arcade cabinet. Here's another view. Yeah, so it's a plywood construction. There's a screen, sort of pretty typical with all arcade cabinets. I have steel plating, and then there's the controller sort of sandwiched in between. And really, the reason I made this is because I need something to hold the screen, and also something to sort of like hide the Raspberry Pi inside of. And the form, excuse me, the form factor sort of takes from the classic arcade game cabinet. And I think that's important because it'll help attract people to it. If it was just a screen and like this controller, I feel like people might be confused about what it is, or they might not have any interest. A lot of people know what an arcade cabinet is and they can relate to it. So they might expect to see a game. And I think that'll help to attract people to this. So this is just a view of the actual product. So you can see there's the screen and the steel casing around my controller. And in this photo, I actually have the computer hooked up to it. I'm not running on the Raspberry Pi. It does work on the Raspberry Pi, sort of. The few times that I've tested it, the Raspberry Pi actually lags, like, quite a lot. Almost to the point of being unusable. So I had to just, for like demonstration purposes, really it works best if it's hooked up to a laptop. I'm not sure if that's an issue with P5 and something with Raspberry Pi. I gotta look into it. So the media platform, the actual, like the meat. So the user sees the universe of comments displayed on screen, and like universe, sort of like, I guess not really universe, but the neural network, I guess, which is just going to be like points on a screen with some text in them. And so there's a two-dimensional space where users can navigate around in any direction. It is unusual compared to traditional social media sites, which use you just scroll up or down, and you hyperlink in order to get to other pages. There's not really any hyperlinking in this. It's sort of like I said, you have to navigate. It's like multi-directional navigation. And then a user can create a post by hitting that button, and then they type 144 characters, and then they can place it. And their comment will last only, an hour. And this time is sort of arbitrary. It may change. It could be 24 hours, sort of how Snapchat does it. It could be 30 minutes. I don't really know. It kind of requires some testing. And a user can also hover over someone else's post in order to make a comment on that post. And if they comment on a post, then it will reset the lifespan of that post that they commented on. So it's sort of, by doing that, it sort of increases the relevancy of it. If somebody interacts with it, then it's sort of like gained importance, because somebody else cares about it. So it's just a way of, like, I guess, keeping the conversation going. And yeah, so that's that. So it sort of looks like a network, and I wanted to feel sort of organic, right? It's just like a very like random distribution of content, and these posts sort of like grow and shrink as people interact with them. If you hover over it, it'll grow. It'll grow at you. Okay. Next. So this is sort of what an interaction might look like. So this is when you're hovering over the post. You can then type your comment, and then it posts it. And it draws like a little a line connecting the post to, or the comment to the post. So you sort of see these networks that begin to form as people make comments. And then other ones will sort of disappear. I think it should be really easy to see which areas are relevant in sort of like, hot topics versus things like, I got my hair done today. Or like, dumb things that people aren't really going to care about. I think the things that are going to persist on this platform are going to be more controversial topics where there are going to be, multiple sides. Everybody's going to have an opinion. That's sort of what's going to take the stage. So a few problems that I ran into. So, like I said, P5 sort of lags on the Raspberry Pi. The controller's a bit stiff, right? It only moves 4 directions. You can't do diagonal movements, which um, this is the controller that I had, um, and it does have some trade offs. I think it's still important because it definitely attracts people to the platform. Um, it just from like a usability standpoint, it may not be the best choice, but right there's still that trade off. There's no database at the moment. I think in the future, if I had more time, uh, you know, I would definitely need like another 2 to 3 weeks to even get a database running. But I think it's definitely important for the project. And like, how would you navigate on a mobile now that you don't have joystick? Maybe this is a platform that needs to be used by many people, not just the people at this booth. At least ideally. So maybe use like accelerometer or gyro to navigate. I don't really know. The screen that I'm using is a bit dim and reflective. That's sort of like a resource constraint. Um, the keyboard's small. Maybe I should have used like a full keyboard rather than that tiny thing. But you're only posting 144 characters, so it's not terrible. Uh, and it's a little bit of an unfamiliar interface for a social media platform. We're so accustomed to screens and just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and everything's usually presented in like rectangle format. So this is a little bit, um, maybe that's something that people have difficulty with when they first see it. Um, so I may in the future have to deal with like how to make um, these posts like more readable. Uh, so ephemerality of information. This is sort of the main point of the project. It's there's also like sort of a tension that exists here because people like to feel important. Sort of like if you compare Yelp, the reason people use Yelp is because their review persists. Exists for a long time. They post. They feel important. They feel like they've made a contribution. But in reality, if you post that, 6 months down the line, it probably doesn't matter. The restaurant may have changed the way that they like handle meals or whatever, right? So that's another interesting tension. And then, how do you grow this platform? I'm not sure. P5.js runs asynchronously. That's sort of the last one. I don't know. It's just like figuring out the logic of the programming was a little bit difficult. I think, shifting from standard processing to JavaScript processing. Okay. And finally, future goals and iterations. There's quite a lot. I think I'd like to develop a more cohesive visual design to help communicate that this is a social media platform. Um, so a logo, maybe, something that might communicate ephemeral. Snapchat uses a ghost. Ghosts are like sort of transient beings. They're transparent. So like what might be good for communicating this? And maybe there's right. I need to integrate the database, and maybe include the ability to create accounts so people can come back to this. Um, I don't know. Maybe it keeps stats on like how many posts they've made. Um, could include like a photo of them if they wanted to. But I also want to include the ability to just post anonymously. I think that's important for this, important for users. and especially important for maintaining clean data hygiene. And maybe a spectator mode. I can experiment with different ways to display and post the comments. So maybe instead of bubbles, maybe I switch back to rectangles. I don't know. Maybe I make it 3-dimensional. There's a lot of ways that this could go. And I could experiment with different ways to interact on the platforms. Could there be a chat room? Should people be able to share pictures and video? Should it be expanded beyond 144 characters? And maybe the ability to zoom in and out. Sort of like so you can travel further. And then color-coded sections based on topics of discussion. Is there other ways to organize the data? Like, how can I make it easier for these people that are using it to understand what they're looking at? How can I make it easier for them to then go in and like make a comment? And that's really it. Thank you.